Board, I'll make a start. Just a brief overview of today's business. We have 7 statutory rules relating to the Working Families Act 2015. We have an SR Employment Rights, the increase of limits order Northern Ireland 2015, a briefing from NISRA on the latest labour force survey statistics, and a briefing from the Assembly Research and Information Service on Youth Employment Initiative in Northern Ireland. Okay, members, apologies. Apologies from Pat Ramsey. Any other apologies? Okay. Members, no chairperson. Phil? I'm sure if there's no chairperson's business since our last meeting. Members, draft minutes. The minutes of the 18th of March are at page 6 of your pack. Members are agreed that that's accurate of that meeting. Okay. No sign as being correct. Members, matters arising, page 15 of the pack. Members, just matters arising as agreed and as listed. Unless there's any other. Okay, members, action item as agreed. Members, correspondence then is from page 23 of your pack and also tabled. Members, just to note at page 26 is correspondence from the new Commissioner for Children and Young People requesting to meet with the chairperson. Members, if I schedule a meeting with and open it up to any other members who are interested in attending, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, members, page 114 is correspondence from the Committee for Education regarding the Special Educational Needs and Disability Bill. The requested research paper will be discussed at the next meeting immediately following Easter recess. Members, there may be a possibility here, we have talked about bringing forward legislation in regard to our inquiry in regards to SEND, so there may be an opportunity within that bill. 114, Bronwyn, are you okay there?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Okay, members, page 167 is departmental correspondence regarding the implementation of the Careers Review Report. Members, are we content to forward to the Committee for Education for information? Okay, thank you. Members, page 173 is the departmental response regarding the committee query on pathways to success. Members, anything arising from that reply? Okay, members, content to note. Members, just remind members that the Northern Ireland Certification Office of our Trade Unions Employers Association was emailed on Thursday the 19th of March, and hard copies are available in the committee office. In regard to that. Okay, members, correspondence at page 176 is from the department in regard to social clauses. Bronwyn,
Chair, see, because this is such an important area, especially for our inquiry, could we ask how many people with disabilities have actually got employment? Because employers have
social clauses.
Yeah.
Members content? Okay, thanks, Bronwyn. Members, 2 invitations, page 177 is an invitation from Northern Ireland Assembly Business Trust to an apprenticeship scheme briefing with the Minister of Employment and Learning, so that would be relevant to us, members. If you cannot attend or let the clerk know. And it's Tuesday the 14th of April at 4:30 in the Long Gallery. Members, tabled at page 7 is an invitation from the Now project to attend the Money for Life Challenge Northern Ireland final. If any members are interested, if they can let committee staff know they want to attend.
Just to go back to one of I was present when the other things come up, and it's the whole thing and around from Open University in relation to hearing loss.
Yeah.
And when they talked about having some type of conversation with yourself, the committee, or wherever, or people with hearing loss, and it's just given the presentations that we had the other week. Will this be forwarded? Could we forward it on to those to ask for a comment? And if there's anything they want us to raise with the Open University, and has there been any response from the other college?
They're all in. They're all in. All the universities have responded there.
Isn't it just wanted to pick up on it?
Aye.
Is there anything that we can do to pick up on some of it?
It's part of the inquiry.
We can include it in specifically in our inquiry for at this stage, and then if we see we need more evidence after that, we can invite them back. Would that be?
But one of the reasons I raised the thing is that the fact that when we were in Manchester, that they seem far more advanced in the terms of the provision of people that do sign language,
Yeah.
and I think it's. But certainly, if we can.
I think if we make it, we'll make it part of the inquiry and make sure it's up there, because it was, you know, it was evidence. It was evident in Manchester, especially through the, what do you call the place we visited first? Seychelles.
Seychelles,
You know, the amount of sign language being used there. Yeah. So that's all right. They will be included.
No problem.
Okay. Okay, members, anything else on correspondence? If not, members, draft forward work programme is page 179. Members, the draft forward work programme is now scheduled up until and including the 1st of July. Other briefings may be scheduled as they arise. Members, you can tend to note the draft forward work programme.
Chair,
Yes, Anna?
the 15th, that's the week when
Yep.
you're coming back, is that right?
Uh-huh.
And we're going to, in Enniskillen, is there
Yep.
going to be a bus provided, or we just make our own way? Is it going to?
Cutbacks.
Drive.
Give the cover left.
Do what we do from Tyrone
Take a
and
bus,
Fermanagh drive
public
down.
transport?
We don't normally have, we don't have enough members from Belfast to make it cost effective.
So we'll just make our own way.
Because people are all from all around Northern
Ah, okay.
Ireland, the members.
I think everybody should drive the way rural people have to drive to Belfast.
No,
To be fair.
I think, Anna, you get the answer is going to be a no.
so, no.
I'll take
Okay.
that
I
one.
mean, the bus
A mile one,
could, you
is
see,
it-
a bus
is
from
it
Belfast
Belfast or
could
Greater
pick up
Belfast?
people on their way, that saves money. You see? Saves mileage.
Okay. Anna, I don't think it will not be.
Half an hour, Anna, half an hour. I'll take it.
Keep the boot down on it.
Yeah. Okay,
you
members.
send us details of,
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
journey and stuff. Okay, thank you.
Members content with the forward work programme then? Okay, members, agenda item 7 is an SR. There are a number of them this morning again. Is SR 2015-91, Statutory Shared Parental Pay Administration Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. It's at page 183 of your pack. The Department has laid 7 statutory rules on the 12th of March 2015. The committee considered the proposals to make the statutory rules at its meeting on the 11th of February 2015 and agreed that it was content with the proposed statutory rules. There have been no changes to policy content since the proposals were considered by the committee, and the examiner of statutory rules has not yet commented on the rules. These regulations provide for the funding of employers' liabilities to make payments to statutory shared parental pay. They also impose obligations on employers in connection with such payments and confer powers on the Commission of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution and come into operation on the 15th of March. Are members content with the rule?
Content.
Content. If so, that the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2015-91, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay Administration Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objection to the rule. Members, agenda item 8 is SR 2015-92, the Statutory Paternity Pay and Statutory Adoption Pay Paternal Orders and Prospective Adopters Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. It's at page 198 of your pack. These regulations modify and amend the Statutory Paternity Pay and Statutory Adoption Pay General Regulations, Northern Ireland 2002. The regulations also amend and modify the Statutory Paternity Pay and Statutory Adoption Pay Administration Regulations, Northern Ireland 2002. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution and come into effect and operation on the 15th of March 2015. Are members content with the rule?
Content.
Members, if so, the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2015-92, the Statutory Paternity Pay and Statutory Adoption Pay Parental Orders Prospective Adopters Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. Members, agenda item 9 is SR 2015-94, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay General Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. It's at page 215 of your packs. The Statutory Shared Parental Pay General Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, in association with the Shared Parental Leave Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, provide an entitlement for a mother, adopter and a child's father, adoptive parent or a mother's or adopter's partner to take shared parental leave and pay. The statutory rule is subject to conformity resolution and will come into operation on the 15th of March 2015. Are members content with the rule?
Content.
Right.
If so, that the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2015-94, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay General Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner's Statutory Rules report, recommends that they be confirmed by the Assembly. Members, agenda item 10 is SR 2015-99, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay Adoption from Overseas Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, is at page 261 of your pack. These regulations modify the Statutory Shared Parental Pay General Regulations Northern Ireland 2015 to provide an entitlement of statutory shared parental pay for qualifying individuals adopting from overseas. The statutory rule is subject to conformity resolution and will come into operation on the 5th of April 2015. Are members content with this rule?
Content.
Members, if so, the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2015-99, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay Adoption from Overseas Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner's Statutory Rules report, recommends that it is confirmed by the Assembly. Members, agenda item 11 is SR 2015-102, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay Parental Order Cases Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015, is at page 270 of your pack. These regulations modify the Statutory Shared Parental Pay General Regulations Northern Ireland 2015 in cases where a person has applied with another person for a parental order under Section 54 of the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act 2008. The statutory rule is subject to conformity resolution and will come into operation on the 15th of March 2015. Are members content with the rule?
Content.
Members, if so, the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2015-102, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay Parental Order Cases Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner's Statutory Rules report, recommends that it be confirmed by the Assembly. Members, agenda item 12 is SR 2015-103, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay Persons Abroad and Mariners Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, is at page 282. These regulations modified the Statutory Shared Parental Pay General Regulations Northern Ireland 2015 to give certain persons abroad, those who work as mariners and those who work on the continental shelf, an entitlement to Statutory Shared Parental Pay. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution and come into operation on the 15th of March 2015. Are members content with this rule?
Content.
Members, if so, the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2015-103, the Statutory Shared Parental Pay Persons Abroad and Mariners Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner's Statutory Rules report, has no objection to this rule. Members, agenda item 13 is SR 2015-146, the Shared Parental Leave and Statutory Shared Parental Pay Consequential Amendments to Subordinate Legislation Order Northern Ireland 2015, is at page 298 of your pack. The order makes consequential amendments arising from Part 2 of the Working Families Act Northern Ireland 2015. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution and come into operation on the 15th of March. Are members content with this rule?
Content.
Members, if so, the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2015-146, the Shared Parental Leave and Statutory Shared Parental Pay Consequential Amendments to Subordinate Legislation Order Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner's Statutory Rules report, has no objection to the rule. Members, agenda item 14 is SR 2015-169, Employment Rights Increase of Limits Order Northern Ireland 2015. Members, please note we're moving to agenda item number 18, which is tabled at page 48. The Department has laid the statutory rule on the 19th of March 2015. The Committee considered the proposal to make the statutory rule at its meeting on the 18th of March 2015 and agreed that it was content with the proposed statutory rule. The order revises the limits on awards and payments under certain employment rights legislation in line with the rate of inflation. It will come into operation on the 22nd of March 2015. The statutory rule is subject to a laying requirement but not to any Assembly proceedings. Are members content with this rule?
Yep.
Yes.
Members, if so, the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2015-169, Employment Rights Increase of Limits Order Northern Ireland 2015, and has no objection to the rule. Okay, members, thanks for your support through that. Our first briefing this morning, agenda item 15, is a briefing from Ezra on the latest labour market statistics. It will be covered by Hansard. I could ask members, all electronic devices should be switched off, excluding your tablet devices you're using to do your committee packs. Members, the briefing is at page 317 of the Ezra briefing paper, latest labour market statistics, and also tabled at page 11 is the PowerPoint presentation. And I just welcome Dr. James Gallen, Head of Economic Statistics Branch, Department of Finance Personnel, Sona Neenan, Economic and Labour Market Statistics, Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency, and Dr. Stephen Donnelly, Senior Principal Statistician, Department for Employment and Learning.
Thank you.
Folks, you're very, very welcome. James, over to you, I take it.
Thank you very much. I was just, as per our previous presentations, Mr. Chairman, just going to give you, first of all, a run through the latest statistics and then stop for any questions, and we can go into more specific groups of interest. So the latest statistics were published on the 18th of March, just last week. And the lead official statistic is around the unemployment rate, which for Northern Ireland was 6%. That's 6% of the economically active in the period November 2014 to January 2015. So that was down 0.3 percentage points over the quarter, and also down 1.5 percentage points over the year, which is a positive development. We were slightly above the rate of the UK, which was 5.7%. But as you know, any one quarter isn't in itself particularly informative, so we kind of tend to look at the longer term trend, which is the slide over the page. So this is running now from 1993 to 2015. The blue line is Northern Ireland, the red line the UK. The lowest point in the blue line represents May to July 2007, where our unemployment rate was 3.2%. The highest level on the blue line is December 2012, and our unemployment rate was 8.3%. So you can see we've been on a fairly continuous rate of decline since about December 2012 for about just over the last 2 years, and we're down at 6%. And I suppose the other main point out of that graph is over the last couple of years we've been tracking the UK fairly closely. We also have more recent statistics than this from our other main measure of unemployment, which is the job seekers allowance, or the claimant count measure, and that brings us right up until February 2015. And again, we're seeing very similar trends. I mean, over the month there was a decrease of 1,700 persons who went off the register. And this is the 26th consecutive month, so just over 2 years of continuing falls in unemployment on this measure as well. So both measures are telling us broadly the same story. I would point out that, there's been a fall of about 11,000 over the last year in unemployment. Over the last 3 months, there's been a fall of about 5,000. So it seems the last 3 months, there have been quite rapid falls in unemployment. So there seems to be still plenty of life left in falls in the unemployment rate for the minute, anyhow. The next slide shows the Northern Ireland versus the UK in terms of the job seekers allowance. And this, I suppose, is probably a less sanguine sort of a picture, in that we're still the highest of the UK regions in terms of the job seekers allowance, whereas the UK had a plateau in terms of unemployment and then tended to fall, and it has been falling for 3 years. We've had a long continuous increase in job seekers allowance unemployment, and we've only been falling for the last 2 years. So if you think of it, over the last 7 years, we've had 5 years of growing unemployment on job seekers allowance, and 2 years of falling unemployment, whereas the UK they've been falling for 3 years. So our recovery has been, I suppose, much less marked than that in the UK, but there is a recovery there, all right, and it is continuing. So I was going to then look at the from the business's perspective and in terms of employee growth and employee jobs. And the latest information was published related to Q4 2014, so that takes up to December as well. And we had growth there of about just over 1,000 jobs over the quarter. And over the year, we had growth of about 12,000 jobs. So unemployment falling by about 11,000, jobs growth up by about 12,000 over roughly the same period. Reasonably good correspondence there. Over the year, the private sector has increased by just over 12,000. The public sector has fallen slightly by about 300. So the graph over the page gives Northern Ireland versus the UK. Northern Ireland, the blue line, UK, the red line. And it runs from 1998 right up to the present day. The peak was again Q2 2008. We continued to shed jobs until about Q1 2012. And for nearly 3 years, we've been seeing jobs growth in Northern Ireland. The scale of the recovery still hasn't been as marked as the UK, and we're still about 2% lower than that peak that we reached in 2008, whereas in the UK, they're about 2% higher than the peak. Now, our peak was I'm not sure we should always be using that as a reference point, because the feeling was that it was a kind of unsustainable growth in jobs, like a property construction boom. So it's not really the benchmark we want to use, but it's a useful comparator against the UK. So the next slide then shows that the blue line on this occasion is the private sector for Northern Ireland. The red line is the public sector. So we can see the private sector has been continuing to grow there, and I suppose we're facing into a period of public sector jobs cuts potentially. And it's kind of interesting to note that we've already shed quite a few public sector jobs over the period, and most of the growth that's occurring is in the private sector. Now, there's kind of reclassifications that are going on in there between Lloyd's and Royal Mail that have gone from public to private, but I think the trend remains the same. So I suppose I run the risk of giving you a picture of all light and no shade in this, and it's kind of difficult to see in the graph there, but in the private sector, just over the last quarter, there was a decrease in private sector jobs just over the last quarter. So we've had 11 quarters of growth in the private sector, but just this last quarter we have a very slight decrease. And if you look at any of the Ulster Bank Purchasing Managers Index for around that period, they were also reporting a bit of a slowdown. So I wouldn't pin too much on one quarter. I mean, the decrease was only 270 jobs, but I suppose it's just to say that we needn't necessarily expect continued growth. It's just best to look at the trends. And over the page then we switch on to the output measures, which are the sales by businesses, and it's just to point out that manufacturing is doing quite well in this area. We've growth of 1.9% over the quarter, and Northern Ireland has increased by 2.7%, while the UK has been increased by 1.1%. And that's also reflected in manufacturing jobs. And I suppose the point I would make, the growth we're seeing in jobs, there's a lot of them in and around these, over the last 3 or 4 years, around administrative and support jobs. So they tend to be more the employment agency type jobs. They're not. And the fall over the quarter was actually in around the financial services and some of the scientific and technical jobs. So, but I wouldn't read too much into any one quarter. The next slide then has a look at the annual survey of hours and earnings, and this relates to April 2014, but it's the most recent ones we have, and it has been showing a fall in gross weekly earnings for Northern Ireland employees by about 2%. So from April 2013 to April 2014, we've had a fall of 2% in our weekly earnings, whereas the UK is up slightly, 0.6%. And you'll see there's still quite a gap. Northern Ireland is the red line there. We're well below the UK figure. I think it's about 80-odd%. And our wage levels are continuing to fall. Now that sometimes can be because people are working less hours, but even when you look at the hourly rate and compare it, you can see that there's a fall of 2.4% in the hourly rate. Now the mix of jobs might be changing. And over the next page then, it's just a summary, which kind of shows on the top left-hand quadrant there the labour force survey rate. We're tracking UK. It's looking pretty positive, even though we're slightly higher. On the top right-hand quadrant, there's about 46,000 people on claimant receipt of job seekers allowance, and that shows the monthly change. And you can see the monthly fall has been increasing over the last since about September, which is a positive sign as well. And then below is just the employee jobs, and you can see the relative share. So I was going to pause there. Those are mainly the headline results. I mean, the next bit of the presentation is more to talk about the long-term groups that are of interest to the committee in terms of long-term unemployment, youth unemployment, needs groups. But I'm happy to pause here if you want to pick up on anything I've said. Or
Okay. James, can I just come back there to your annual surveys, the annual survey in hours and earnings, your gross weekly earnings for all employees. There's a dip there in Northern Ireland average wage. Is there any, do you take into account anywhere in that in 0 hours contracts when you were talking about hourly rates? And is that extrapolated out in your data, or is that just all?
Well, we would measure anybody who was working in the reference week. So if there were some people who were on a 0 hours contract and were working in that week, we would include them. But if they were on a 0 hours contract and weren't working in that week, we wouldn't include them. If you understand, you know, that they mightn't actually have been called in to do work on the particular point that we were referring to.
Right,
so they would be represented in there, but it wouldn't be a complete picture of.
Right. And when you're doing that survey, how many people are you?
That's a 1% survey of all employees. So it's based on your 1% of everybody with a national insurance number, PAYE number.
Right. Okay.
In employment. So it's about 6,000 employees that we go to. Yeah, so it's reasonably robust.
Okay. Again, and just on your quarterly employment survey in December 2014, you have a reference to public sector jobs and private sector jobs. Public sector jobs are decreased by 300 and private sector jobs increased by 12,000. Where's that data collected from?
The private sector jobs is a survey of all businesses it's a survey of all businesses with 25 or more employees. So each quarter, if you have more than 25 employees, we'll send you a form asking you how many employees you have, and we'll take a sample of the rest of them with less than 25 employees, and then we'll gross that up, and we'll come up with an estimate for the private sector. On the public sector, we're going round the departments, corporations, trusts, and asking them how many employees do they have at a particular point in time. And in our publications, we break it down by all the different types of public sector employees, so you can track it for the civil service or the health sector or education.
Tom?
Yep. Given when we listen to what's happening within the public sector, and we hear from colleges and all about the number of cuts that's going to be made and all, how do you see this affecting the unemployment figures, say, over the next 6 to 12 months? Maybe that's an unfair question. How do you see that affecting that in that period of time, given what we listen to, the number of cuts that's down the line?
If you work on the premise that people who are leaving public sector employment, the majority of them, they could either go into employment, or they could go into inactivity, or they could go into unemployment. Now, if they go into inactivity, which is they're looking after the family, taking a year off, a couple of years off, it's not going to affect the unemployment rate, because just by the definitions that we use, they're not going to be included as, they're not going to be defined as unemployed, because they're not looking for work. But it depends, of those 20,000, how many of those are going to be actively looking for work. And if all 20,000 hadn't other, were actively looking for replacement employment, that would, I suppose, add another 50% onto the unemployment rate. But it sounds unlikely that that would be the case. It's more the inactivity rate would go up.
Okay.
Fran?
Sure. Thanks for the presentation as always. It's fairly interesting, and especially when you're getting news that there has been a continuous drop in unemployment over, I think it's the last 26 months. But in there again, it heads worrying figures, an increase by 1,000, I think, on NEETs. And that's something that has concerned the committee. The other thing, and is there any indications there that say that is telling us that there would be an upturn in dealing with the 16 to 24-year-olds, but also in terms of the employment. I know that we got figures there on the wage differential between England and here. And I think it probably worked out about £50-odd a week of a difference. But does that hide the fact that many of the jobs that's created here is not only what probably people call low-value jobs in terms of wages, but that many of those people fall into what's called the workforce that rely on benefits to substitute for the low earnings that they get?
It's what we're measuring is earnings from employment. So if you're an employee, so it doesn't. So to the extent that you're a low wage earner, it would be reflected in that post. In that report, what we tend to report is the median, which is kind of where 50% of the population lies. Yep. So you can see who the bottom 20% are, who the bottom 40% are, versus the UK, and you would see our low wage earner profile compared to them. I don't have it on me, but I can get that for you, okay? And in terms of even people below the minimum wage, we do tend to have a higher percentage. They tend to be more like apprentices and that, but Northern Ireland seems to have a higher percentage of people below the minimum wage, so we wouldn't actually get the total earnings. And
I think, and I've asked it before, and I was just looking at the percentage of unemployment with Darien Strabane being out front in in terms of the number of unemployed, followed by Belfast, But one of the things that we've never, I think at one stage we might have got it, and that was the constituency breakdown. I think that was, you hear the likes of, in West Belfast, that there's been a continuous drop, maybe been small drops, but drops in unemployment on a monthly basis. But it's difficult to quantify. And is there a mechanism there where we could get information that shows you that breakdown, the sectors that it's in, the unemployment rate for each of the constituencies? And I think because in many ways, that we do hear, and it's always brilliant to hear that there are jobs coming in, a big lot of it in the call sector, but when people hear that there's been another 2,000 jobs in Belfast, that people automatically assume that's dealing with the high unemployment rate in many areas of Belfast. But many of the people that are going in are going in from surrounding areas and travel into Belfast for work. And it's difficult to think when we hear the jobs how it actually impacts
Where
on
does it
some of
impact
the
on
some
the
of the areas that ever facing. Just to give you an example, I live, you know, sandwiched between two of the biggest employers in Belfast. One's the RVH and the other's the city centre, but it has the worst rates of unemployment, it has the worst rates of deprivation, and so being sandwiched in between the two biggest employers hasn't impacted on the unemployment rate within it.
Yep. If I take that point first, I mean, we were going to show you something that we've developed to kind of try and make that information available. Una, if we could look at the data visualization. So this is
James,
something...
that's going on further in your presentation, is it?
Yes.
Right, aye. Well, just wait, Frau, you finishing this section? Anna?
Thank you, Chair. It's very interesting, James, and I think the graphs just speaks volumes rather than reading the text. I'm interested to look at the public and private sector jobs graphs. It's interesting. From 2009, there has been a steady or quite a steep decrease in public sector jobs. You know, we peaked at 2009 and it goes down quite drastically. And is that due to a redundancy scheme?
I wouldn't say no, I couldn't answer that directly in terms of redundancies. I think in the most recent period we've seen a lot of health and social services. It has been one of the biggest areas of decline. So from about Q2 2008 to Q4 2011, we had a fall of about 2,500. Education, a fall of 1,750. Human health and social work is about 690. That's up just at Q4 2011. So it's been right across the range, you know, health and social work, education, and some public administration. We do publish a much more detailed breakdown of that, so I could make that available to the committee if that was of help.
It just begs the question then, if there is already a trend of public services shrinking, that we need this very drastic 20,000 people expected to go through the voluntary exit scheme. Do we need that if we are going to follow this trend?
Well, I think in terms of our share of, if you take our public sector employee jobs as a share of our total number of employee jobs, we're still about 30% of our employee jobs are public sector, whereas you look at the UK as a whole, their share is about 25%. Scotland is about, Wales is about 28%. I think it's roughly about the closest. So we could present an argument on that basis that we're overrepresented in terms of public sector. The other side of the argument is it's not that we're overrepresented in terms of the public sector, because we've a much younger population, and if you look at it per head of the population, the differences aren't as marked. The other side of the argument is that it's the private sector that we should be growing. You know, we've an underdeveloped private, young.
I know what you mean.
So it's, I mean, it isn't going to help our employment rate, or it isn't going to help our inactivity rate. If, as you might expect, a lot of people go into inactivity.
To redundancy
Yeah.
as well in the next
And
4
indeed,
years.
it might have implications if the committee set a target for programme for government targets to raise our employment rate. You would presumably have to factor in that, you know, we're going to have to replace those 20,000 jobs to maintain our employment rate.
There's jobs out there for them.
Yeah, have to be private.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Anna.
Thank
William?
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly it's good to see the private sector growing. I suppose we hear a lot of talk about rebalancing the economy. It's good to see that. I seen in 2008 we were down quite significantly at that stage due to the economic crash. But we have got over halfway up again, I think, if I read the figures right. 24,000 jobs, I think, was a minus of 24,000 in 2008, and now we are plus 13,000 some odds there. So Can you see that trend continuing? Would you be confident that that trend will continue?
Well, we don't really do the future in, in
it's very hard to do,
in official statistics, but I know that the Ulster University Centre for Economic Policy has some of its projections are saying that the rate of growth is likely to slow over the next couple of years, and I think after 2015, 2016, you begin to see jobs grow about 0.5%, 0.4%. So at the minute we're creating jobs of 12,000. 2012 we created about 4,000 jobs. 2013 just over 11.5. 2014 about 12. And I think they see that continuing for another year or so and then gradually slowing off. So that, I mean, the NISRA wouldn't be able to answer questions like that, but looking
I know
at
what you mean, yeah.
an independent organisation, I mean, they tend to suggest that growth is going to slow after a year or so.
Yeah, I just heard on the news last night that Dundee and Nunyan was creating 200 new jobs, so it's positive that that's happening. Okay.
Bronwyn?
Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I think it would be useful, maybe something that you could consider regarding the issue of lower wages. We got a labour mobility report last year that showed there's a high number of job vacancies in, for example, Derry and Belfast, but those jobs are lower paid. Probably if you took them on, wouldn't even pay the rent in your home. So why would anybody do that? That wouldn't even make common sense. Whereas if you go outside of Belfast and Derry, you will find probably a high number of people on lower paid jobs. So therefore, those in job seekers, the figures are a lot lower west of the Ban. So I think it'd be useful just to get that picture.
It's like the geographical distribution of lower paid jobs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
Because like I said, the labour mobility report did show that there are job vacancies in those areas, but they're lower paid. Whereas if you go west of the Ban, we do have people in those lower paid jobs, but they're still living in poverty. Yeah, the working poor, yeah.
Yeah. I'd have to think about that one. It's whether we could get the earnings. I think we can disaggregate them. There's a limit to the level at which we can disaggregate them.
It was carried in the Irish news this week. Areas like Fermanagh and South Tyrone, there's a high number of people working in the lower paid jobs, so the figures are there.
Yep, we can
I
certainly
don't
look
quite
at
understand. What you're saying is, in Belfast, because the rents are higher, so
No.
people won't take jobs that are lower paid, but in the west of the Ban, then people would take those jobs.
Well, they don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice, but they can manage because lower
No,
rent is
they're still living in poverty.
Okay, but they take those jobs in rural areas, lower paid jobs.
Well, the figures are
more
there to
than-
show
than
that
in
they do.
Belfast.
It depends what
Okay.
area of Belfast you come
Yeah.
from.
Well,
In fact,
But is it due to cost of living higher in Belfast, or?
I don't know, I think that's what you tell me, scrutiny is further.
Yeah, I think we had an AQ recently about average earnings by parliamentary constituency. That should show it up for you. I mean, it's not total earnings; it's just earnings from employment. But we could certainly put something together for you.
Okay, thanks, James. Okay, James, you want to go on to your...
I mean, Fra had been asking something about parliamentary constituency and claimant count unemployment. So we could kind of deviated from our plan. It might take you a minute to get that up.
We'll leave it to the end.
Or we can leave it to the end.
Yes.
Yeah. That's okay. So I was going to talk a little bit then about the the long-term unemployed, and the blue line is the Northern Ireland element of the long-term unemployed. So this is the proportion of those people who are unemployed who are actually long-term unemployed. So it's 63% in Northern Ireland of the unemployed are unemployed for more than a year, and it's it's over nearly twice the UK rate, and it has been increasing. It's up 14 percentage points over the year. So even though unemployment has been falling, the long-term unemployed haven't benefited as much as others, and their share of unemployment has increased. And it has more than doubled since about 2006 for Northern Ireland. Long-term unemployment remains a real issue. The next graph is about, who are the long-term unemployed in age terms? And the blue, Northern Ireland's on the left, UK's on the right. The blue segment at the bottom on the left is the 16 to 24 age group, and you can see we've proportionately fewer or long-term unemployed who are young long-term unemployed than in the UK. We have a lower share. Our problem groups is the red band, which is bigger in Northern Ireland than it is in the UK. So we have about 25% of our 25 to 34-year-olds, 25% of the long-term unemployed are 25 to 34. And then the purple bar at the top is the about 20% of the long-term unemployed are 45 to 54-year-olds. So it's not particularly an 18 or 16 to 24-year-old issue, it's more the older age groups. The next slide then shows casting it a slightly different way. These are all the UK regions and countries, and it shows that we have the second highest long-term unemployment rate. It's expressed slightly differently here. So the only one that's worse is the northeast of England, followed by the West Midlands. Scotland has only 2.2% of its economically active people who are long-term unemployed. Okay, the next slide then goes on to youth unemployment. And I suppose that this looks at the blue line is the unemployment rate for economically active 18 to 24-year-olds. So nearly 20%, 1 in 5 of economically active 18 to 24-year-olds are unemployed, whereas only 4% of 25 plus economically active are unemployed. So there is a disproportionately larger share of the 18 to 24-year-olds who are unemployed, and that has been that has been increasing over the past. It's fallen, I think, over the last year or so. It was higher. August to October 2013, it was 24%. So it is coming down, but it's still quite high. So if we compare that then on the next slide against the UK, you can say we've 19.5% for Northern Ireland youth unemployment compared to 14%. So that translates into you're about 3.5 times more likely to be unemployed if you're 18 to 24 and economically active, whereas in the UK it's only about 2.5 times. So it's just illustrating the point that our rate is still worse than that in the UK. Okay, the next slide is kind of, the blue line is the number of 16 to 24-year-olds this time in employment. So you can see the numbers of 16 to 24-year-olds in employment has been falling up until about the end of 2012, and then it's been gradually increasing. The green line is the number of 16 to 24-year-olds in education. And it's interesting to note that as the number of young people in employment fell, they seem to be moving more into education. Now that would include the further education colleges. I don't think it's as marked when you move to the 18 to 24-year-old group. And the red line refers to the number of unemployed and the number of inactive. So that's as a percentage of the overall population. You know, sometimes people get mixed up and they say, oh, you have an youth unemployment rate of 20%. That means 1 in 5 young people are unemployed. Well, no, it's 1 in 5 young people who are economically active. That's either employed or unemployed, who are unemployed. Whereas this is that figure, the 9.2% of all 16 to 24-year-olds are unemployed. So I just thought that's interesting. It shows as employment prospects were worsening, people tended to go into education, and as they've improved, the percentage in education has reduced. And then we were also talking, the next slide is the youth payment count rate by district council area, the old district council areas. And as Karen had noted earlier, that it's Derry, Strabane, Limavady, Moyle, Carrickfergus are the ones that are worse affected in terms of the youth unemployment rate, and that's very similar for the overall unemployment rate. And we'll go on later, some of this, we'll be able to see those trends over time. That's just a snapshot at the minute, but we'll see whether there has been any improvement for particular constituencies.
See, just on it, and I think the point I was trying to make earlier on was that whilst you have Belfast just in around the 6.8 or 7% or in terms of youth unemployment, that still doesn't reflect the geographical spread within the city of Belfast of where the concentrated unemployment is, especially among young people.
We'll get that for you in the parliamentary constituencies. Will break it down into north, east, west Belfast. So we'll come on to that a bit later if that's okay. And then the next slide is, I know it's the committee's interested in employment rates, NI versus the UK. And you can see this first part of the slide just shows the blue line is the UK, the red line is Northern Ireland. You can see the employment rate for our 16 to 24-year-olds is worse than in the UK. The blue line, as you keep, so along the bottom are the age ranges. So as I go from left to right, I'm looking at older age groups. As I go up the graph, I'm looking at the employment rate. So it's what percentage of the working age of the population of the age group is actually employed. You can see there's quite low numbers of, even in the UK, of young people that are employed up to that's about age 21. As you get up to the top of the graph, it starts to improve. So you can see there, Northern Ireland is actually slightly higher among adults from the mid-20s to the late 30s. The red line, Northern Ireland, is actually higher than that in the UK. Not by much, but I think the interesting point of this graph is as you go into the older age groups, Northern Ireland has a lower employment rate than the UK. So while there's a lot of focus on the youth unemployment, I suppose I should declare a self-interest here, but as you get a little bit older, you're kind of less likely to be in employment here than you are in the UK. So it's not just the employment rate is quite a large element of the inactivity rate. So it's actually an older person's issue as well as a youth unemployment issue. Why that might be the case, might repay a bit more examination. As you get to the older age groups, then it all tails off. And I suppose the other point I would make is we do have an ageing population. By the time we get to 2025, our kind of the greying of Northern Ireland does become an issue, and the increase in pension age will sort of help address that and increase the number of the working age population. But it's also a factor that's, as well as public sector job cuts, and it's a little bit further down the line, but I suppose it's one that we shouldn't be losing sight of. Okay. I have something on inactivity, but this is across the areas and countries and regions of the UK. Northern Ireland is the second from the right there. And sometimes hear people say, oh, our inactivity rate is higher because we have a much younger population and we've many more students in education, and that's a good thing. So what we've done here is we've taken the students out of the mix, and we've just looked at those who are economically inactive because they're looking after the family, they're retired, or they're sick or disabled. And you can see that the purple line is the sick or disabled. So you can see we still have the highest of the UK regions, people citing sickness and disability as the reason for their economic inactivity. It's kind of, I think that's reasonably well known, but I just thought I'd take out the student element to make it a bit clearer. Okay, and the next group we were just going to talk about was the NEETs, not in education, not in employment, education or training, and I was going to hand over to my colleague just to talk you through some of that, if that was okay.
Okay, what I wanted to do was to run you through some of the statistics and the latest research evidence that will inform the review of Pathways to Success and the review of the NEET strategy. And the sources that I'm going to be using, I'm going to be drawing on the Labour Force survey for up-to-date information, but I'm also going to use the census and some international research, in particular a very detailed piece of research on NEETs that was done right across Europe by an organisation called Eurofound. Now that was conducted in 2012. Since 2008, the Northern Ireland and the UK NEET rates have overlapped one another. And in Northern Ireland, the number of NEETs has always been in and around 35,000 or so, although the latest December 2014 figures show that the NEET rate is 37,000 young people, or 17% of that age group. Now, about half of them will be unemployed and the other half will be economically inactive. And the latest figures show that there's potentially a bit of a gap opening up there between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, but it's too early to say whether that gap will be sustained, because these figures do vary quarter on quarter by 2,000 or 3,000 per quarter. Now, the Eurofound research within a European context, the Nordic countries and Northern Europe tend to have the lowest rates of NEETs, and in those countries the rates are about 8 to 12% of that population group. In Northern Ireland and the UK, we have rates in the 15 to 18% range, and in European terms that puts us middle ranking. And the southern European countries tend to have the highest rates, and some of those countries, Portugal, Spain, Italy, have rates in excess of 23%. So in a European context, we're in the middle of the pack, so to speak. From a UK perspective, though, Northern Ireland has the highest NEET rate in the UK at the moment at 17%, compared to 16% in Wales and 13% in the UK as a whole. But next quarter, Wales and Northern Ireland tend to be neck and neck. Sometimes Wales is ahead of Northern Ireland, sometimes Northern Ireland is ahead of Wales. As far as geographical spread is concerned, we've got NEETs right throughout the province. In Derry and Strabane, the rates tend to be high. And there are black spots in Belfast. And as regards the 20 to 24-year-old NEET group, which forms about 3/4 of all NEETs, the black spots will be in West Belfast and North Belfast and in parts of Foyle. And the rates there for that age group can be almost one young person in three. So between 28% and 33% of young people in those areas will actually be categorised as NEET. But it's important to look at the numbers as well as the percentages, because in places like Craigavon, there's a lot of young people. So while the percentage that would be NEET might be quite small in relative terms. There's still a lot of young people there, so there's still a lot of needs there. So any strategy that's going to be looking, any policy interventions that we're looking at have to take into consideration not just the black spots, but the fact that there are lots of needs in areas where there might be some actual affluence. As far as household income and needs is concerned, this is from the Eurofound research. And what it shows is that young people in households with low incomes have the highest chances of becoming neat. And as the household income increases, the chance of becoming neat actually falls until, curiously, at about the top 25% most affluent households, the need rate starts to increase. So the need rate starts to increase among households that are in the top 25% of the income distribution. And we think this is because of things like actually quite well qualified neets who are taking a gap year or are being supported by their parents, but the probability actually increases among affluent households. But I think that suggests that some young people may be neat actually by choice. Now, as far as Northern Ireland needs and deprivation is concerned, we're getting a similar picture. We see that in the 20% most deprived areas in Northern Ireland, about one person who are aged 16 to 24 in 4 will be neat, where it's less than 1 in 10 in the most affluent areas. But there are affluent areas where there are 8% of the young people there will be neets. Now, I want to move on now to family type. And I think this is particularly important because family support structures are very important to a young person. So we've examined this from the census, which gave us a census of 33,000 young people classified as neat. Now, out of those 33,000, 12,000 were in a family where both parents were present. So at least potentially there's some parental support available to those young people. Just over 8,000 were actually being looked after within a lone parent households. And we know from other research that about half of lone parent households are in relative poverty. And also that in those households, in lone parent households in Northern Ireland, up to 50% of the young people in those households will have behavioural difficulties. So it's likely that in those households there's a lot of children that will have multiple disadvantages. Around 5,000 neets are lone parents themselves, and as such they will have caring responsibilities, and that will have implications for their participation both in the labour market and in education. Another 5,000 are living alone independently, so we know very little about the family support structures that those 5,000 young people may or may not have. About 3,000 are living as a cohabiting or married couple, so caring responsibilities will feature in some of those families, and a small number are living in communal establishments. And I think that demonstrates the very varied nature of the family circumstances of the NEET group, but the group also varies quite a lot in terms of their qualifications. Many young people categorised as NEET have good qualifications, and probably 20 to 24% of them have good qualifications. But more than 50% of them have low or no qualifications at all. Now, a young person in Northern Ireland aged 18 to 24 can expect to command a weekly gross wage of about £135 per week. But even as if these young people remain at this level of qualification, even in adulthood, what will happen is, at the top, the biggest bar in that graph, that's young people with no qualifications, they can expect to command a salary of £250 and a probability of being in employment of 36%. Now, between qualifications levels 1, 2 and 3, those young people with those qualifications can expect a wage of somewhere between £250 and £300 and an employment rate of somewhere between 50 and 60%. But once you get up into the level 4 group, those young people will have an employment rate of 85% or better and a weekly wage of over £600. So this is within the NEET categories. So there is a lot of variation in their geographical spread. There's a lot of variation in their family circumstances. There's a lot of variation in their qualifications. So in terms of education, In terms of family support, in terms of family income, and in terms of distribution, there's a lot of variation here. And these young people are also going to be varied in terms of their motivation and their access to job opportunities. So I think I want to conclude by saying that the Pathways to Success programme, if it's going to be effective, it's going to have to coordinate support services, and it's going to have to give considerable attention and consideration to the very different characteristics of these young people. These young people will need tailored, actually bespoke interventions in many cases, and they're a very varied group. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Just back to me, we were going to try and take a look at some of the questions Mr McCann was asking. So this is something that we have, our Northern Ireland Neighbourhood Information Service, which is freely available on the website. You can either access it through our website, we're based in Derry, or through the NISRA website, and it gives the claimant count rates over time, broken down by geographical area for Northern Ireland. So you will, that line that you see in the graph is the Northern Ireland rate, which always stays there. The various areas can be separated either into the existing district councils, or by parliamentary constituency, or by the new district councils. So it's you'll be able to go in and compare any your geographical area of interest with the Northern Ireland total, or with any other similar geographical area. So if we wanted to take, I don't know, Una, can you pull out West Belfast for us on the parliamentary constituency areas?
Well, for these slides are demonstration, so these are based on the new district councils.
Oh, these are the new district councils, okay. So
you can't log into the internet here. So this is the new district councils, but the exact same facility is available for assembly areas.
Sorry, James, who can access this if you say?
Everybody, it's 9.
it's publicly available.
Right.
So it's kind of I mean, one of the thrusts of official statistics is for us to do a better job in communicating the information and making it available in terms of self-service. So this is something that we have been developing in recent times. A lot of the neighbourhood information stuff and the deprivation information is already has been available online. We're kind of gradually building it up on the labour market side. So I can't see from here. What have we got there, Una?
So if just basically, you just basically hover over the map and can highlight, just for interest, highlighted the lowest rates, claim account rates. This is annual claim account rates by the new district council. So basically clicked on Lisburn Castlereagh to provide the lowest rate. You'll see it being added to the graph on the bottom. So the middle line then is our Northern Ireland rate, and then I've added Derry and Strabane. So if you look at the chart then, this is your Derry Strabane time series. The middle one then is the Northern Ireland line, and the bottom one then is your Lisbon Castlereagh. So you can just basically keep adding overlays and add all your geographical areas to easily compare them then on the chart.
And when you get down to the geographical areas, the rate is the percentage of the population in receipt of job seekers allowance as a percentage of the people resident in that area for 16 to 64. When it's in the Northern Ireland level, it's about the percentage of the workforce. So you kind of switch from workforce to residents for geographical area. So that shows that indeed Derry and Strabane hasn't been, well, I think in the last annual one, it has improved. So you can see the actual rates if you just hover over the button, but it's, and you can download the data as well if.
You can download the data there. If you click it on data source there, it downloads it in an Excel table. That's your monthly rates then, and that's your assembly areas, and the old councils are still available as well. And there are other types as well. This is the monthly rate, so the first one is the annual, this is the monthly. It's the same kind of facility, so again you can just keep adding, selecting whichever areas you want to compare and bring up the data in the same way.
And the old local councils are still there. How long will they still be there for, or is that a data set you intend keeping?
The plan is to run with the new ones from implementation.
Right.
Yeah, I think where there's a demonstrated policy need, I mean, user need for it, we'll consider carrying it on, but I think the intention is to to move to the new ones. We'll,
I suppose, let's come back to Fra's point, James. I was just looking at Mid and East Antrim for the current count. I think we're Ballymena and Larne, which are two of the councils coming into Mid and East Antrim, are well below the Northern Ireland average. Carrickfergus is the 5th highest. So when Mid and East Antrim is going to be taken as a whole, that data set in Carrick that highlights the high claimant count down, and there's going to be lost.
well, we can get claimant count measures down to pretty low geographical areas. Even below. I think I'm right. Una, can we get down to the ward level?
Yeah, we could certainly look at the different.
So there's a lot of powerful information there. It's just
On the website that you're on, can you get down to ward level on that?
No, because visually it just would be too much information, but certainly if you wanted to take one, that we can provide it.
well, it's on the NINUS one at ward level. Takes a little bit of finding. It's
James,
kind of.
could you send maybe just the committee through the links to those
Sure.
sites where that can be at the different levels? I think that would be handy for us too.
Very good.
Very good.
I think that brought us to the end, Chair, of the presentation anyhow. So.
Okay. Just a couple of points. The qualifications, Stephen, that you were going through, from level 1, the average wage expectancy, percentage of being or the percentage opportunity of being employed. Could you give us that data as well?
Certainly, yes.
Is that all right? Just, I know we have the table there, but it's just to get the specific data in regards to levels of age qualification, as to what the earnings could be, expectancy of being in work. Okay, members, anything? That? James, can I just ask, it's in regards to, I need to find this again, it's the proportion of long-term unemployed. I find it now. A proportion of unemployed here, long-term unemployed in Northern Ireland. You're showing, and I think your point was that the percentage of those people is increasing, of the long-term who make up the unemployed. I think was your point. But surely, as the numbers of unemployed people drop, if that cohort of long-term unemployed doesn't change, that percentage will increase proportionally. Is that not? Is that data set not showing that we're not tackling those numbers that are long-term unemployed?
I think if the share of the unemployed, if the long-term share of the unemployed is increasing, it suggests that the fall in their unemployment rate isn't as pronounced as the fall in the long-term unemployed.
Is that the set demonstrating then that we're not tackling those long-term unemployed people? We're not tackling that problem?
I suppose I'm giving the relative position here, whereas if you looked at the absolute, well, we'd have to look at the absolute, but it could be coming down, but it's just not coming down at as fast a rate as the overall rate. So it's kind of, they're being disproportionately represented among the unemployed. But we could kind of pull out the numbers to see if.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
It's just, it gets a bit confusing sometimes when you have the definition on economically inactive and that people that are unemployed.
Yeah, I mean
what's the definition of
the unemployed is the percentage of the economically active, and the economically active are the unemployed plus the employed. So when we talk about the unemployment rate being 6%, it's 6% of people who are economically active. That's either employed or unemployed. So the people who are inactive, the people looking after the home, sick or disabled or ill, who are students, others, they're all retired. Those are all the inactive. So they're not in the denominator, if you like, the bottom of it's not in the rate. So unemployment is kind of, now you could have people flowing out of inactivity into unemployment, if they couldn't afford to be economically inactive, they would be flowing into unemployment. And I mean, you're perfectly right. There's a slice of the economically inactive who say that they want a job, and it's roughly about the same as the number of people who are unemployed. So that's, I think it's off the top of my head, it's about 50 odd thousand. It's roughly about the same. So, but they don't meet the official criteria, and you could nearly talk about those as being the discouraged workers. So I mean, we stick with these International Labour Organization definitions, and to be economically active, you have to be available for work, or you have to, in the next 2 weeks, or you have to have been actively seeking work over the previous month or so. So if the interviewer comes to the door and somebody says, well, sure, there's no point in my looking for work, you know, I haven't done anything, there's no chance of me getting a job, then they're not economically active, haven't met the criteria, they're into the economically inactive. But you say, would you like a job? Yes, we'll count them as wanting a job. So it kind of depends which definition you pick. I mean, the official one is what we're reporting.
I suppose it's whatever definition you pick when you get down to the figures. Because I remember the debate quite a while ago, there was 100,000 people in incapacity benefit that totally skewed the figures of what they call the economic active. You know, sometimes you think that headings like this were purely developed to hide the true unemployment figures, and you know. Well, I'm not saying
no. I mean, we're well. If you cast your mind back, I mean, you and I are probably old enough to know that originally we were always reporting or a lot of the effort went into reporting the claimant count, the number of people on the register. But there was a suspicion, I think, a certain Conservative Prime Minister was changing the eligibility criteria for the benefits, the unemployment benefits, which was forcing the numbers down. So that's why they switched to this internationally recognised one. So because different systems with different eligibility criteria in, you know, France or the Republic or here. So the labour force survey one means it's a level playing field for everybody. So in fact what it does is it holds everybody to the same standard. And if you're interested in that wider definition, if you look at this, you would like it, you know, you would like a job, but you're not actually haven't been actively seeking for it. And as you say, if you put that in, I mean, you're nearly doubling the number of people who would like to work, but for one reason or another, you know, aren't actively searching. So you do need to read the small print, all right.
But you're saying it depends who's in charge of the statistics at any given time.
Well, it depends on the International Labour Organization. You know, they're the guys that say this is the most comparable measure to use.
But the reason I raised that is that the figures like that, and in terms of incapacity benefit a number of years ago, that they were still obviously claimants, but that they weren't counted. That they were, I think they weren't classed as are being unemployed or something. And what it done then, it's come back about 10, 15 years ago, it skewed the unemployment figures, and it didn't reflect the serious problems that were there in figures and statistics.
If everybody in incapacity benefit was in the economically inactive, then you're perfectly right. They wouldn't be included in the active population. It would affect the denominator.
Okay. James, Stephen, thank you very much for coming along. It's been very useful. If you can get the links across for those data sets. Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. members, moving on to agenda item 16 is a briefing from Assembly Research, the Employment Initiative in Northern Ireland. Members, page 325 of your packs. Just welcome on to the table. On over to you, sir.
This briefing is on a query raised by the committee during a previous presentation on the EU Commission Work Programme for 2015. It discusses Northern Ireland's eligibility for accessing the Youth Employment Initiative. The briefing should take around about 5 minutes, and I'll be happy to take any questions at the end. The Youth Employment Initiative, or YEI, was developed by the European Commission in order to tackle high levels of youth unemployment across the EU, with a particular focus on those who are not in employment, education or training needs. The European Commission states that the Youth Employment Initiative will be complementary to other projects undertaken at national level, including those of European Social Fund support, with a view to setting up or implementing the youth guarantee schemes, such as reforming the relevant institutions and services. The target population for the initiative is those aged 15 to 24 who are NEET. Under the YEI, a number of measures are supported, including direct support for high-quality traineeships and apprenticeships, provision of first job experience with placements for at least 6 months, and mobility measures to bring skills and jobs together. In supporting documents regarding the YEI, the Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion Directorate of the European Commission stated that the initiative should be primarily focused on the young people from the regions that need it most. NUTS 2 regions where youth unemployment is higher than 25%. However, in exceptional cases, it might be useful to support people residing in parts of non-eligible regions which also suffer from particularly high youth unemployment levels. That is why the Commission has proposed some flexibility for the Member States, allowing them to spend up to 10% of the resources outside the eligible regions. The precise support to be provided under the YEI is agreed between the European Commission and Member States, with the UK Government submitting its plans on the 3rd of March 2014. In its submission, the UK Government argued that its current approach to youth unemployment met the key elements of a youth guarantee, such as the youth contract, and as such it would not be introducing one directly. The UK Government received approximately £170 million from the YEI and announced in April 2014 that it had identified 5 NUTS 2 regions that were eligible under the initiative. It should be noted that 2012 is the reference year used to determine eligibility for the programme. In the UK, these regions are Inner London, which received £35.7 million, Merseyside, £22.2 million, Tees Valley and Durham, which received £19.8 million, the West Midlands with £42.2 million, and South West Scotland, which received £38.6 million. These funds account for at least 90% of the UK allocation. In regards to 10% flexibility, the UK Government has decided to target NUTS 3 areas with youth unemployment rates above 30% in 2012. These areas and the amounts they receive are Hull with £3.7 million, Nottingham with £4 million, Leicester with £4.1 million, and Thurrock with £1.5 million. The funding will be given to relevant local enterprise partnership areas and used for programmes such as apprenticeships, work experience placements, and youth entrepreneurship programmes. And I'll now briefly discuss Northern Ireland and its eligibility under the programme. Northern Ireland is a NUTS 2 region. However, with a youth unemployment rate of 19.1% in 2012, it did not reach the qualifying criteria for support under the YEI. It also has 5 NUTS 3 regions. These are Belfast, the east of Northern Ireland, the north of Northern Ireland, west and south of Northern Ireland, and outer Belfast. NISRA, the Department of Finance and Personnel, was contacted to provide unemployment data for Northern Ireland's NUTS 3 regions in order to assess Northern Ireland's potential eligibility. Unfortunately, the LFS is a sample-based survey, and as such, some results are too small for a reliable estimate. Only 3 data points were provided, and that can be seen in Table 2 of the briefing paper. And of these, only 1 is over the 30% threshold. This being the north of NI, NUTS 3 region in 2013, which was equivalent to 34.1% people, or 8,000 young people. As the qualifying period for the YEI in the UK was during 2012, it is not possible, based on the data available, to state whether or not any of the NI NUTS 3 regions had the same level of the youth unemployment as the 6 UK regions which receive funding under the 10% eligibility. If the committee has any questions, I'll be happy to turn.
Okay, thank you very much. On who Northern Ireland divided into 5 NUTS 3 regions, who drew up the boundaries for the NUTS regions?
As far as I know, it's the European Union, and I think I'll go back and check for you to make sure, but I think it might be based around population, but I'll have to confirm it for you to see.
Because you think sort of if the boundaries should have been different, there've been parts of Northern Ireland nearly should have been eligible rather than excluded when you look at some of those. No, that was just really That's the only question I have. Members, any?
Sure, and that's following on from that, because again, obviously the lattice was to target the worst areas, and whilst it talks about a 19.1%, you know, within those regions that we, 5 regions that parts of the north that we see, you know, there even if you break it down into constituency-wide basis, you know, there are as youth unemployment that possibly could reach and surpass some of the thing, yeah. And again, I can only speak for in terms of Belfast, but if you take the likes of Foyle, Strabane, and that is probably included in the 31%. But if you take the likes of Belfast, which has some of the more affluent areas in the north, it skews the figures for our parts of Belfast that may need that direct help. And I'm using Belfast, but it could affect any other parts of the north that has serious and youth unemployment.
Yeah, the measure that's used, because it's LFS based, it can only go down to a certain level, and you can see it in the table, the figures become unreliable after a certain point, and they can't, and there's, I think, below 6,000 people, they can't provide estimates because it's unreliable at that point, and it could be skewed anyway. So.
Okay, but I'm just looking at, you know, if the West, to use their phrases, if the west of Northern Ireland had been taken as a nuts region, there could have been a possibility of that being included, rather than the north of Northern Ireland or the west and south of Northern Ireland as 2 areas. It's just strange boundaries when you look at it from, I suppose, Northern Ireland politicians' point of view. Members, anyone else? No? Owen, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Members, any other business? Members, are we content to forward that report to the DETI committee? Because they have been doing some work in that region as well. Okay. Members, any other members, just an update on the European Social Fund. As far as I'm aware, everything's with the Minister at this minute in time, so that's where we are. There's no further updates, so if there's any other business. Members, if not, date and time and place of next meeting. Next meeting will be Wednesday, 22nd of April, 10 a.m. in room 29. But just remind members the committee will be on a visit to the Crest Centre in South West College Enniskillen campus on Wednesday, the 15th of April. Members, the meeting's adjourned. If you could let us know if you're going to the
Assembly, Committee Room 29.